Hey, isn't it great that summer blockbuster movies are now just political Rorschach tests? I want to die!
You know, really, the superhero is a pretty American invention. Now, that's not to say that cultures in the past didn't have stories about beings with extraordinary powers, but I feel like the gods of old in ancient Greece, Scandinavia, Africa, and Asia, they were always either immensely flawed figures who sort of reflected aspects of the culture that they were born from.
I am tired of the same old faces. The same old things.
Or they were just personifications or explanations for natural phenomena that they just didn't have explanations for yet. But the superhero, a person with superpowers who uses their abilities to help other people out of just pure altruism or empathy, is a pretty recent invention, and it's an American invention. It is pure Americana, and one of the first figures of this kind was Superman. From the beginning, Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster intended for Superman to be a champion of the oppressed, a friend to anyone and a helping hand to those in need, fighting social injustices, domestically and abroad. Because no matter where they're from, where they are, who they are, what they identify as, everyone is deserving of kindness, and everyone's life means something. In fact, one of the first issues of Superman's solo series was Superman #2, in which Superman, he goes to the fictional country of Baravia to intervene in an ongoing conflict to save innocent people from the violence of... Hey, wait a second.
They chose him! Let them die!
Quit messing around!
I'm not messing around. I'm doing important stuff.
Superman is a film that just gets what type of story it's telling. James Gunn is a filmmaker who truly understands the medium of comic books and what they're all about, and he has such a knack for adapting those elements to the screen. It's clear to anyone, frankly, who has spent any substantial amount of time studying the medium of comic books that there has always been an intrinsic progressiveness and humanity at the core of comic book superhero stories, shining a light on societal injustices and fears and showing people, through the escapism of these larger-than-life characters and situations, a better path forward. And truly, comic books, comic book movies, cartoons, and television have taught me how to be a person in a lot of ways. How to be kind, how to be vulnerable and open and accepting and loving. Not to say that, I didn't have figures around me when I was growing up that taught me values like this, but these stories that really tapped into something that was just so interesting to my little boy goopy brain that really helped reinforce those values. So it's no coincidence that I kind of grew up to be a leftist. No, I'm serious. In our modern westernized understanding of the political spectrum, people on the left tend to usually be driven by progressivism and material reality and empiricism, dialectics, collectivism, the kind of stuff that makes you a more empathetic person, someone who actually values freedoms and the lives of their fellow human beings, things that make you want to make the world a better place for everyone, no matter who they are or what they are. And since making good art usually requires one to be curious and understanding in their observations of the world around them, it's no wonder that some of the best art and artists have a left-leaning bent to them. But then you have people on the right side of that spectrum. Those people tend to be driven more by things like hate or grievance or tribalism, social conservatism, things that lead people to resent things like freedom, because that means that other people get to do things, and if they do something that they don't like for some stupid reason like insecurity or jealousy, they cry and piss and moan and shit their pants about it. People on the right love censorship because that makes it easier for them to lie or bend the truth. If you're insecure or jealous of another person because they seem to be happier than you or better than you at a certain thing, well, then just lie and make up whatever excuse you want to oppress or erase a group of people. Like, no, stop lying. All your problems are not because of the Jews or black people or brown people or feminism or trans people or immigrants or whatever. I'm sorry for the politics 101 lesson here, but I really hope that, if you've seen the movie, you know where I'm going with this and why it's important to say it and why it's important to talk about stuff like this. Going back to the film itself, with someone like James Gunn at the helm, he's actually able to utilize cinematic language and technology available to him to make it feel like a comic book. I've seen a lot of people express the sentiment that visually the film feels artificial and wrong in some way. But in the reality, the film just has this very focused, kinetic, and sleek visual style befitting of the character and the material. With the lensing of the movie in particular, there's this very interesting use of wider focal lengths to capture as much visual information at once and packing every frame with as much visual detail as possible, and so much of the movie being on sticks with static, focused frames, and when the action happens, the use of steady cams and cranes, dollies, for this very deliberate and smooth camera language that really captures the tone of a comic book and a story from a comic book that you could absolutely see yourself reading panel to panel in a comic book. And I believe that too circles back to one of my main takeaways from the movie tonally, is just its earnestness. This is one of the most earnest films to come out in a long time, and in no better way does that come through than in the way it portrays Superman. Like, David Corenswet is Superman. There's no massive scenes of scrappy, super-powered brawling with wanton destruction. This Superman at one point goes out of his way to make sure that the giant monster that he just hit doesn't stumble into a building full of people while it's stumbling around trying to get its footing. As opposed to, Snyder's Superman, who literally, let that whole courtroom full of people explode and burn so that he could, or a farm, or whatever. I'm just gonna interrupt myself here really quickly to drop a take that might be hot, might be lukewarm, might be nothing, I don't know. But I just want to say that I think that all of us collectively should just kind of move on from the past and stop holding on to nostalgia and realize that filmmakers and actors have gotten way better at adapting the source material that they are adapting, especially whenever it comes to comic books. And I just want to say that I think that having watched the Richard Donner Superman movies, having watched Superman Returns, having watched the Snyder movies, Smallville, Superman and whatever, David Corenswet is my favorite, and I think the best actor to play the part ever. And I think that we all need to stop glazing the Nolan movies and Christian Bale and understand that Robert Pattinson is the best actor to have ever played Batman, Bruce Wayne, because I think that they have a very deep understanding of the characters, and they have figured out a way to embody everything that makes those characters who they are in a very unique and interesting way. So, yeah, I think that we should all kind of stop huffing that nostalgia. Anyway, back to the video. And Lois Lane actually, does stuff in this movie. She actually gets to exercise her journalistic skills, and she has actual, bite to her, the way that Lois Lane should be written. She is kind of written in this very interesting way where it feels like she's taking advantage of her femininity to almost disarm people. Like, she understands that men will look at her and not expect much from her because, well, she's a woman. And that right there, that's my Lois Lane. She takes advantage of any leverage that she can get to the bottom of whatever she's trying to get to the bottom of. She even kind of uses it against Clark in one instance. Not to say that this version of Clark is a misogynist or anything like that. He's obviously not, but when Lois floats the idea of her interviewing him as Superman, you get the sense that he kind of expects, just a fun little session of softball questions. But when she starts down an actual investigative line of questioning, he's obviously taken aback by it, evidenced by the fact that he kind of loses his temper at a couple points. And in a lot of ways, this movie is also about journalism's role in making the world a better place as well, which is very important in a world full of manufactured consent and reputation laundering and sycophants and bootlickers who call themselves journalists. It's important to be reminded what actual journalism looks like and what it can do. And let us not forget that that whole interview scene takes up 12 minutes of the movie's runtime, which is a pretty substantial chunk, but it doesn't feel like it bogs the movie down or kills the pacing because you just know, you feel the thematic weight of it. And also, that's saying nothing of David Corenswet and Rachel Brosnahan's performances being so capable of treating the material with gravity whenever the moment calls for it. But then, too, you have Corenswet pulling off that classic Christopher Reeve Clark Kent clumsiness, which, fun fact, I don't think this is a coincidence that David Corenswet and Christopher Reeve both studied physical comedy at Juilliard. Nathan Fillion is just a perfect, asshole as Guy Gardner, pitch perfect Guy Gardner. Isabella Merced really kind of nails that reserved tough girl persona that you would expect from Kendra Saunders' Hawk Girl. And Mr. Terrific is just a scene stealer. Something I've always loved about the character is how he makes being a nerd and a scientist kind of look cool in a way that Mr. Fantastic and Tony Stark don't. Reed Richards is more of a tortured pragmatist, I guess you could say. And Tony is just a sarcastic, sardonic asshole. But Mr. Terrific just kind of takes pride in what he creates, and he is so calculated in his way of being. It feels like everything he physically does has a purpose, and he's very reserved with his energy. And he's so nonchalant about it, which makes it even cooler. It's just cool without being a dick or cracking wise all the time. And also too, Ma and Pa Kent were just so real. And even though I don't have parental feelings or urges or I don't want to be a parent, but that one-on-one that Clark and Jonathan have had me getting a little misty-eyed, because it just felt like the dialogue that Jonathan Kent had in that scene felt so authentically what I perceive parenthood to be about, the platonic ideal of what parenthood is, and what I respect about those who take on the burden of raising someone, raising a human being in a world like the world that we live in. And not only that, but also to just have respect for the person that your child grows up to be, the way that he acts with Clark. It's just really good. It's just really good. And that's kind of what I want this channel to kind of be about, is just being positive. And I seriously couldn't have asked for a better movie, a better comic book movie to talk about this summer than this. It just felt like everyone got exactly what they needed. There's barely any real fat in the movie that you could trim, and nobody necessarily feels underdeveloped. And man, Nicholas Hoult is just hating harder than anyone's ever hated before. Not to say that he has good reasons to hate, but also it was funny, my girlfriend just kept saying to me, she was I just need to think of him as Thomas from Nosferatu to keep myself from getting too mad at the actor Nicholas Hoult. And he's just the perfect representation of that envious, insecure techno oligarch who will bend the truth and stoke the fires of inequality and bigotry to get what he wants. I mean, you see the guy's space exploration program for his company is called SpaceX. Elon Musk is subnormal IQ, and has only really lucked into success or taken credit for people's work or forced his way into taking credit for people's work. So, at least Lex is actually smart, but I digress. And I'm sure you've heard, even if you haven't seen the movie at this point, about how Lex recovers and releases the full message that Jor-El and Lara sent with baby Cal. And turns out that, in sort of post-crisis origin story fashion, that they intended for Clark to come to Earth and basically lord over humanity, to subjugate humanity. And they say to take as many wives in his harem as he can to continue the Kryptonian race and the L bloodline. And all that Clark ever heard of that message was the first part where they say that they send him to Earth where he can do the most good. He just never heard the part where they actually explain what they meant by do the most good. And as Jonathan Kent says, how Clark interpreted that first part of that message and his drive to help and care for people, no matter what, says infinitely more about him as a person than some insane supremacist eugenicist message that he was sent to Earth with. And I know that so many people's first reaction to that information might be some kind of knee-jerk thing about how maybe it muddles the idea of this being an immigrant story, but I don't think so, because I think that really it says a lot more about how genuine good that's at someone's core can always overcome any sort of strange, misguided bigotry or feelings of supremacy. Like it feeds more into the message of hope than anything else, I think. And I think that really does help the immigrant story, actually, because what other reason would someone have to come to a place where they can make a better life for themselves? Are they coming here to take advantage of everyone? I think that it says a lot more about people who would interpret this as muddying the message of being a pro-immigrant story than the actual content of the story itself. And Lex points to that and says, never mind his actions, this is where he comes from. He's trying to tap into that same essentialism that I was just talking about, that same bigotry and xenophobia. Man, I wonder what I can point to where an immigrant or group of immigrants had some falsehood perpetuated against them for the sake of, just keeping an uninformed and manipulable population in line with the interests of the wealthy and powerful.
In Springfield, they're eating the dogs. The people that came in, they're eating the cats.
It's just so refreshing to see a comic book movie, a superhero movie that isn't afraid to take a stance. It's not afraid of alienating people whose beliefs and values might not align with it, especially whenever the movie itself is advocating for things that are just good. Superman is the prototypical superhero. He is kind and he sees the beauty in everyone and everything because that's just what he believes, and he believes in good. And today, being kind and being good is just, it's become a political position. In a world where every day it's becoming more and more acceptable to just be a cynical loser or a hateful bigot, to be a good person, to be progressive and inclusive and generally decent, has somehow become a polarizing position to take. And Superman flies in the face of all of that, and he always has. It's just that now we have actual cartoonishly evil people in positions of power on network TV, on Instagram, TikTok, Twitch, or Rumble, or whatever, normalizing and spreading vitriol, the broken worldview of people that heroes like Superman, Batman, Spider-Man, and Daredevil have dedicated themselves to fighting. And the writers and artists who create those stories just fall on the side of decency. And if you want to slap the woke sticker on it or something and say that that is the true evil and that is an affront to your rights or your values, then, thanks for just letting us know that you're literally the villain in this story. And honestly, too, if you want to be cynical about it and poke holes in the story, the movie, or the character for the sake of poking holes, I don't have any respect for that cynicism that's masquerading as this very hollow, surface level criticism. You end up holding space for the detachment from real world issues and problems that these narratives are trying to shine light on. I keep coming back to the sentiment that the movie has this clunky and juvenile sort of way of navigating its real world issues. And to that I say, no, it doesn't. The film's inciting incident is Superman intervening in an ostensibly unjustified invasion of a fictional nation called Jaranpur, perpetrated by a neighboring nation, Baravia. Jaranpur is portrayed as a rather poor country, lacking any sort of defensive military capabilities whatsoever, and Baravia is a US-backed, militarily advanced, well-equipped settler colonial project who will use their military capabilities to enact violence upon unarmed civilian population. No, but it's okay because the Baravian government isn't classified as a terrorist organization by the United States. So, it's fine. It's fine. Everything's fine. Everything's fine. The IDF is not... Oh, did I just... And Superman intervenes because innocent people would have been killed, purely because they fall on one side of an arbitrary line drawn on a map, and they look and sound different from the people on the other side of that arbitrary line, and they want their land. They arbitrarily have US support and more wealth. I mean, there's nothing more to it. It's ethnic cleansing. Baravia wants to enact a genocide, and even when the third act is gearing up and you see the Baravian military moving on the border, you hear them say these insanely dehumanizing things about these innocent people on the other side of that border. Superman is a figure whose stories have always been allegories for real societal injustices and fears of the time. So, that being said, it's not that hard to see a US-backed, highly militarized, invading colonial project oppressing a much less equipped neighboring state on cultural lines as an allegory for the Israeli persecution and ongoing genocide of the Palestinian population. I'm just engaging with the text. There, I said it. I said it. Who am I kidding? I feel like if you're watching this video, you probably also are not sympathetic to the Israeli government or the IDF. And Lex Luthor's intention of taking half of that land and turning it into this technocratic dictatorship where he can be a king, being in reference to Donald Trump's strange plan that was floated around about turning a demolished and ethnically cleansed Gaza into some weird resort for the rich. And you guys remember that, right? Like the weird, shitty AI video that him and Elon Musk put out. AI art is the current aesthetic of fascism. And if you disagree, and if you defend AI art, I will find out where you live. Like, so myopic and lacking in any decency, to the point where they don't even think about the immense suffering that is taking place under their nose as they enable this bloodthirsty fascist war cabinet of freaks to continue their genocidal campaign. When I say it's going on under their nose, they know exactly what they're doing. And I think a big part of what this movie is trying to say is that, a lot of the times, even though things like the Israel-Palestine conflict or any sort of deeply rooted bigotry or systemic oppression have a lot of history and moving parts, and there are many people with many fingers and many pies. But, at the end of the day, it really could be as simple as telling everyone, hey, stop lying, stop dehumanizing, stop doing genocide, stop being petty, stop being weird, making the truth known, the truth that we all are human beings and no racial divide or border divide or religious or cultural differences makes it right to oppress or be violent toward another group or individual. And it's that cynical, defeatist, black-pilled attitude, that excuse to stop participating in the goings-on of the world that ultimately enables things like the suffering in Gaza and the West Bank, or the oppression of any racial or ethnic minorities, or the persecution of queer and trans folk. Like, do you ever see Superman or Batman, Spider-Man, or Daredevil, or Captain America, or any other superhero refuse to help someone because they belong to a group that they personally dislike for some stupid loser reason? No, because they don't have any stupid, insecure reasons for disliking someone who belongs to a different race or class strata, or because they have different pronouns from what they were assigned at birth. And when you're presented with something that shows you a better way, if you just loved and cared and participated, and say it's too complicated, or I don't want to think about it, or I don't want to get involved, you're just You're just fence sitting, and those who observe evil and think nothing of it are complicit in the evil. When you give in to that cynicism and that apathy, you end up just holding water for the Lex Luthors of the world. The insecure, money-minded, ego-driven, envious man-babies who perpetuate the lies and division. You're handing the culture war to them, so to speak, for lack of a better phrase, I guess. Your Donald Trumps, your Elon Musks, your Stephen Millers. Hell, I'll even go as far as to say establishment Democrats like Chuck Schumer or Hakeem Jeffries. These people hate you and your neighbors, and they don't know or care about you. To them, you might as well should be an army of monkeys in a pocket universe, getting hate beamed into their brains and taking advantage of people's meaningless hatred to farm engagement on Twitter. I mean, it really does sound kind of silly whenever you say it out loud, but like, it has real world implications. What can I say? They're fine with the idea of someone like you refusing to participate. It just makes it easier for them. But if you want to be someone like Superman and be that helping hand or that friend to someone that might desperately need it, they'll do anything to discourage you or to stop you because they're afraid of you. And that's true power. Superman represents what we are capable of if we just used our brains a little bit and put facts over feelings and just realized that the world would be a better place if we all just participated and cared. In the film, there are a group of other heroes called the Justice Gang. Green Lantern Guy Gardner, Hawkgirl Kendra Saunders, and Mr. Terrific Michael Holt. After Superman is apprehended by the DOJ and handed over to Lex's Planet Watch, it's, public-private partnerships, federal agencies outsourcing to private companies who aren't beholden to the same regulations as a government-ran institution, couldn't be me. To be detained in what is basically a black site because he was a high-profile political dissident / activist who, as soon as they had an excuse to go after, they disappear him. And the members of the Justice Gang, after rightfully being grilled by Lois Lane, throw their hands up and say, nah, I don't want to get involved. It's too complicated. The public perception of the guy after this sensationalized hit piece, it's kind of taking a hit. So, why even try to fight the obvious evil, if that's what's going to happen to us, whatever. I'm going to interrupt myself again just to point something out that I didn't point out. It is important to say that the consequences for Superman getting involved in the conflict and then being detained in this pocket universe black site are all completely manufactured by Lex Luthor, who has an actual stake in the ongoing conflict. And it's a big MIC thing. It's just important to point out that the consequences for what Superman did were completely manufactured. So the Justice Gang, even though they don't know it, don't really have much of a reason to throw their hands up and say we don't want to get involved in many such cases. And I'll give you 3 guesses as to what real-world sentiment and group of people the Justice Gang are meant to represent in this instance. That's right! The defeatist, black-pilled excuse to not participate, expressed by edgy cynics and do-nothing liberals who paved the way for evil. Yay! That's my kind of hero. Need I remind you that the movie is not subtle about this? It portrays this as an obvious character flaw. You're supposed to look at Guy Gardner and Hawkgirl and say, do something, Don't be defeatist about it. At least Mr. Terrific has the motivation to at least find out where Superman is when he's captured by Lex. And it's that curiosity and willingness to participate that ultimately got the rest of the Justice Gang involved. And it was Superman's tenacity and his kindness and his genuine want to make the world a better place that inspired them to follow through. And the problem gets solved. The conflict gets resolved. It feels like the cultural conversation around this film, keeping in line with Superman stories of the past, has really kind of shed a light on a lot of things for a lot of people. And I think that there's something really special about that. And it's why I love movies, it's why I love comic books, and it's why I love stories and telling stories. Please don't deny yourself something that might make you a better person or enrich your life for the sake of appearing above it all or better than anyone else. Just be kind to people. Let people live their truth. Don't put people down. Look for the beauty and the worth in everyone and everything, and actually care, because that's the real counterculture. That's the real punk rock. And like I always say, meet the art and the artist where they are, and maybe think a little harder about what it may say about you if you react to something like Superman with cynicism and hatred, or whatever other negative emotion it might be. Man, Superman was just really good, and I just wanted to talk about how good I think it is, and my takeaways from it. I couldn't find a way to kind of work it into the script, but, I've been seeing a lot of talk online about Robert Pattinson, Matt Reeves' Batman being slotted into the DCU, and honestly, I think that it would be really fucking stupid of DC Studios, James Gunn and Peter Safran to not do that. Because, didn't James Gunn say that the whole point of the DCU is to embrace tonal variety? And what better way to illustrate that than to have something like Superman be up against something like Creature Commandos or Peacemaker that's a little bit more like adult and like irreverent, but then also you can have space for a gritty and corrupt Gotham with a detective Batman who is like grungy. Let's have grunge and punk rock finally meet, okay? Let's do that. And also, you already have a great actor attached to like this big role in this franchise, and you already have like a base of people who absolutely love what the Batman is and what that little corner of the DCU would be. I don't know. I just think that it would be kind of dumb to not do it. James Gunn and Peter Safran have to know that like people are much, much less interested in a Batman Brave and the Bold movie directed by the guy who brought us The Flash than, Matt Reeves' sequel to the critically acclaimed The Batman. And whoever they cast as Batman in this Brave and the Bold movie that might not happen actually because they still don't have a writer and there hasn't been any updates on it. There's no way that people would be less into that or more into that guy than Robert Pattinson. Are you kidding me? A generational talent and you're just gonna throw that away? Like, come on. Yeah, Superman's good. It's a pretty good 2 hours of your time.